So this particular patch went through today and balanced different weapons. Well, obviously we see the FAL there, the Holger, the Bruen, and the M91. I already broke down what specifically changed across all these various weapons. So now let's go ahead and talk about if this will actually change the meta. Because personally, I think it actually will, but primarily when it comes to the FAL, it's going to kind of remove that from the Warzone meta where the Bruen fits. It kind of came down a peg, and that allows other weapons to kind of bridge that gap and balance it out. So we might actually see more weapons as part of the meta. I know some people are saying, well, the Bruen's still strong. Well, exactly. It's still strong. It wasn't put in a place where it's complete garbage. It's still allowed to stay in the meta. That just tells you how broken it was before, because it definitely got a nerf. About 15 to 20% of its range got taken off. So we're going to talk about the top weapons currently within Warzone, give you a few different class setups for them. If you enjoy the video or learn something new, please do me a favor hitting that like button. Goal in today's video is 2,500 likes. And if you're brand new, want to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, just make sure you subscribe with notifications on. Also, just a quick heads up, my Gfuel code is up to 30% off right now from August 12th through August 14th. So if you're looking to try it out for a first time, a lot of people have been getting those sample ones, so you can try a bunch of different flavors. Or if you already kind of know what you like, it's a great opportunity to restock. Also, there's a brand new Sonic Peach Ring flavor if you're looking to try something that it just came out. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. Link in the description, or just use code JGOD at checkout. So since the FAL received the larger of the nerfs, I think it's best to kind of focus on what are going to be the best up close options. Obviously, I talked about the Origin being OP and is more of a niche weapon because it's really only good up to about 7 meters. And beyond that, it doesn't have enough versatility. So I would have included on this list. That's kind of more of an honorable mention. But let's go ahead and get into the SMGs that I think are your best close quarters options. So the third best option, in my opinion, is going to be the P90. And I think you got to run that with the monolithic suppressor, the FSS 10.6 inch pro barrel, and then we have stippled rear grip, sleight of hand, and the forged tack close quarters comb. And I think this one overall deals enough damage. If it was a hair better, it would be right next to the MP7, but because it doesn't really perform quite as well, I kind of took it down just a notch, and it ends up taking that third place SMG slot or close quarter slot. And then the next one we'll focus on is the MP7. Obviously, the MP7 has been very dominant for a while, right up there with the MP5. But even with all the nerfs to the MP5, they're going to kind of leave that one alone just because generally the pro players are using that and they don't really want to mess up the meta going into champs, which is the M4 and the MP5. So they're not likely to touch those two weapons until after the CDL in a couple weeks when champs is all over. So for the MP7, I would use the monolithic suppressor, the FSS recon barrel, the Merc foregrip, the 60 round mag, as well as sleight of hand. If you're comfortable with the reload time and maybe you want a little bit more mobility, you can always go for the no stock attachment, and that would allow you to have extra mobility, faster aim down sight at the cost of a little bit more recoil. But obviously, depending on how you want to use this weapon, which we're going to talk about when we get to a couple of the primary meta weapons as far as the rifles and LMGs go, how this could fit in there, because you're going to want to be able to hit those medium to short range engagements. You might not necessarily want to go with the no stock attachment if you're going to struggle with some of the recoil, even though this is definitely on the lower end when it comes to recoil. And then obviously that's going to lead us to the number one option, in my opinion, and that's going to be the MP5. And the MP5 has basically been the best SMG in Warzone. I know that right at the launch, a lot of people were kind of leaning towards the MP7 because it was so good at range, because nobody was using the top tier meta weapons yet. So you can compete, use this with like a sniper rifle when there was a heavy sniper meta. Now you don't see a lot of people running snipers, even though there are people that do. You just generally don't see it. It's normally a rifle SMG combo, and that is pretty much every single lobby, especially when you're in those medium to higher skill bracketed, skill-based matchmaking lobbies. So when it comes to the MP5, there's a few different options you can go, but pretty much I've been using the same one because it's tried and true in my opinion. So the class setup I've been using since they nerfed the collapsible stock is to use the integrated suppressor, which I've always used, Merc foregrip, 45 round mag, stipple grip tape, so you get the little bit faster aim down sight. Some people will go with the 5 milliwatt because they want the hip fire spread there. You can go that route if you want collapsible stock. You don't worry about recoil, but I don't use that for the same reason with the MP7. I want to make sure I hit those shots, and I feel like the mobility is so much better than most of the rifles, or pretty much all the rifles, unless you're doing the growl with like the weirdest class setup possible. I think this one still gives you a decent enough aim down sight speed, where you can win most of those engagements at close quarters without an issue, without giving away your position with the laser. So that's the route I go with the sleight of hand, like I said. So pretty much that would be the class setup. Pretty straightforward. Tried and true. This is what I use in multiplayer as well. So now when it comes to the super long range option, we're going to talk about the HDR. Obviously, some people might use the Rytech. I don't think a lot of people. It did get a buff now that you can get headshots, but I still don't really see that as the most viable option. I think most people are going to lean towards the HDR or the Kar 98. I kind of put them tied, even though you're going to get a lot less hit markers with the HDR, just because it's more like hit scan up to about 200 meters than the Kar 98. But a true skilled player can really get accustomed to using the Kar 98. And it just takes a lot of hours, which I don't think most players have. So the HDR is just the easier choice. So we'll look at a couple class setups when it comes to those two weapons. So the first thing I run on the HDR is the monolithic suppressor, the HDR Pro, the TAC laser, and then the FTAC Stalker Scout. And here's where it gets a little bit tricky. If you want a little bit more zoom, you could always go with the variable zoom scope and do the zoom in portion, especially if you're going to combine that with like an M4 where it's kind of one of those short, medium, and long range, but not super long range. You could do that, or maybe an AMAX combo if you're running like solos, duos, because you are going to run into an ammo situation if you're running the AMAX without a secondary that has multiple shots in it, like an MP5, P90, or the MP7 that we just talked about. So you can go that route. If you feel like that's not a route you want to go and you want to save an attachment, you could always put on extra ammo, or you can go with the focusing perk, which will actually allow you to get a little bit of flinch resistance. But normally if you're getting shot at, it's very difficult to still hit that shot even with focus on there. So it's really one of those trade-offs. You got to kind of do what works best for you. But I've been liking the variable zoom scope for that pure fact that you get significantly more range. And normally if somebody's not running that optic, it's going to be very tricky for them to actually hit you at those ranges. So pretty much when it comes to the Kar 98K, I pretty much do the same thing. Monolithic, the Singard custom 27.6 inch barrel. We got the TAC laser, the variable zoom scope, and then the FTAC Sport Comb, which obviously if you don't want that particular optic, you could always put something else. Maybe if you're going to be using it more for quick scoping, you might go a different route. But overall, I think that gives you the most zoom and allows you to hit the shots as far as possible without any issues where it looks like you're just aiming at a pixel. So that's the route I'd go with the Kar 98K. So that's going to introduce us to the rifles and the LMGs. And I think I'm going to start off with the AMAX. I think the AMAX is a little bit underrated because it does pack a punch. Even at close quarters, if you manage to land those chest shots, you can get the TTK down pretty low, which basically means it's going to melt. The biggest issue I ran into with this weapon, especially if you go into trios or quads, is a lot of times it's very difficult to down 3 players, get a reload off, finish them off, especially if they're self-reviving. You end up with some difficult situations that maybe the M4 doesn't have, like I mentioned earlier, where it has a 60 round mag and you could down multiple and then proceed to finish people off if you're going to combine that with the sniper rifle. So the AMAX, I think this is the best bet to keep it where you're using this as your medium to long range option. If you're forced into close quarters, you use it close quarters, but it does melt. It definitely does melt. So the class setup I like for the AMAX is going to be the monolithic suppressor, the Zodiac barrel, the Commando foregrip, the 45 round mag, as well as whatever optic you want to go with. Personally, I'll go with the GI Mini Reflex, and the reason it's not really fully in the meta all the time, you don't see it all that often, is because of that 45 round mag. That just makes it very impractical in a lot of situations. Next weapon up is a little bit of a sleeper that I know a lot of people have been talking about. It's been a little bit under the radar, and that is going to be the PKM. I've liked the PKM pretty much in multiplayer. Pretty much it's one of my highest KD weapons in multiplayer, and I've liked it in Warzone, and especially early on in the game's life cycle. I even had this as one of the main weapons that a lot of people should be using. I encouraged it, and then obviously the Bruen kind of took over the meta, but it's one of those sleepers where a gun starts to emerge once a weapon has received a little bit of a nerf. Obviously the Bruen was untouched basically when it would drop, and then the Growl got a nerf, and then all of a sudden people are like, well, what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing? And everyone kind of started gravitating towards the Bruen, even though literally nothing changed. And I think this is going to kind of fill that role because you can actually get its aim down sight, recoil, bullet velocity, all as good as or better than the Bruen. But obviously the biggest issue you're going to run into with the PKM is going to be that like 8-second reload speed. So you got to find a way to sacrifice an attachment. You're not going to sacrifice the optic. but you do kind of run into some of those issues where it's like, well, what are you really going to run to get the best class setup possible? So the class setup for the PKM is going to be the monolithic suppressor, the extended barrel, that's a 26.9-inch barrel, the snatch grip, which is going to help with ADS speed as well as overall recoil. Then you got the tack laser, which is going to help with your aim down sight speed, and then you can use whatever optic you want. I like the Corp Combat. You can use a VOK, kind of swap those out. It really matter of preference. And that's kind of how that class setup works. And you'll notice it's very similar to what the Bruen is using. And it has, like I said, a faster aim down sight time, and I think a lot of people end up leaning towards this because one of the biggest issues with the Bruen before the Grau got the nerf is it was very hard to step away from that type of ADS speed where you got like 350 milliseconds, somewhere around there with the rifle, which a lot of the rifle class setups you'll get around there unless you're speccing them for SMG ranges. And I think because the Bruen has been out for so long and everyone's kind of gravitated towards that, they've kind of gotten the feel of 400, 450 milliseconds, kind of gotten used to it, even though it does feel a little slow. They've gotten used to it and can try out the PKM and at least give it a chance to see if it fits in the meta, because based off time to kill, it's very competitive and it could outgun the Bruen. You just got to know the recoil pattern and get used to kind of how it works in game. But overall, this kind of sleeper that I'm putting right now at 4th, but it could easily elevate to like 2nd or even 1st if enough people kind of jump on it and realize its true potential, which I know there's a bunch of people that already kind of know how good it is, but not the masses. Ranked 3rd on the list is going to be the Bruen, and pretty much nothing changed on the Bruen. We still have the same class setup that everyone's been rocking pretty much. We got the monolithic, the summit barrel, the tack laser, the Corp Combat hollow sight or the VOK, and the 60 round mag, which allows you to get a faster reload, faster ADS speed, all that type of stuff. Some people are saving the ammunition attachment and just rocking the 100 round mag and maybe putting on the commando foregrip or sleight of hand or something else so they can still get a 100 round mag. It just ends up being one of those trade-offs, a matter of preference. Is this thing nerfed into the dirt? No, it's still going to be very viable, still one of the best weapons in Warzone, but not so overpowered that it's very easy for anyone just to gun anyone. I think a couple of the guns have kind of evened the playing field with this nerf that allows those other ones to kind of step into the fold. Like I said, it went from like 1st down to 3rd, so it wasn't a huge knock. I still expect it to probably get nerfed one more time, but if it doesn't, it's definitely kind of at that range where it's borderline overpowered. But again, it still ends up being slower than the next 2 weapons that are going to be on the list, and I think could be kind of taking back over the meta. So number 2 on the list is actually always been good. Even when it's been nerfed in the past, it was still broken. This used to be the meta weapon before the game even had a meta, because everyone kind of just jumped into using this gun, and this is the M4. And the M4 has always been a beast. It's always had really good iron sights, at least in my opinion, really good recoil pattern, very manageable and very easy to use, melts players if you hit your shots, which is relatively easy to do, and has decent mobility and even that medium to long range where you can combine it with the sniper rifle. Or you can kind of deck it out a little bit more for range and maybe a little bit more, recoil control, and then stack it with an MP5 or an MP7. It has a lot of versatility. And the class setup I like to use for the M4 is the monolithic suppressor, the M16 barrel, the tack laser, the commando foregrip, the 60 round mag. And I did swap out the no stock attachment for the tack laser. That's really the only change I've made because of that nerf to no stock. If you don't really have a problem with the ADS speed, you could put on an optic instead of the tack laser. So it has a little bit more versatility, in my opinion, where it can be used as both an SMG and as a rifle. If you kind of stack it appropriately and you understand how to use it, if you get caught off guard, you're still going to be fine. Versus if somebody comes around the corner, you have a PKM, you're going to be a little bit slower. And those are the disadvantages of using those particular LMGs. And that's going to bring us to the Kilo, which I really thought was going to be the #1 weapon after the Grau got nerfed. It kind of just stepped into the fold there. I thought the M13 would kind of balance in there, but it just ends up having some issues. So overall, Kilo ends up taking the top tier weapon right here because it is a little bit slower than the M4, but it has the lowest recoil of any weapon in the entire game. A little different because it kind of goes up and a little bit to the left, but if you understand the recoil, this thing, you don't miss shots. It's basically almost 100% accurate, and it gives you the best chance to get as close as possible to that theoretical time to kill, meaning that when you fire the weapon, all those individual bullets hit. There's no issues with bullet drop off or any of that. This weapon lasers people, melts armor, all that good stuff, and it is pretty solid up to about 80 meters. Then it has a little bit of a drop off, but even then you're still able to hit those shots and manage the recoil and still beam people, especially if you're combining this with the VLK optics. So as far as the class setup goes for the Kilo, I'm using the monolithic suppressor, the Prowler barrel. Pretty much everyone uses the same dang thing. Commando foregrip, 60 round mag, and then whatever optic you have of your choice. Particular, I like the VLK, I like the GI Mini Reflex. Obviously in Warzone you want to hit the further ranges, so the VLK is typically the route most people go. And that ends up being the list. Obviously, some of you are going to agree, some of you are going to disagree, but this is pretty much how the meta sits currently in Warzone, and a lot of that shifted just because of a Bruen nerf, and then they nerfed the FAL pretty much into the dirt for a majority of players. It ended up being a 5-shot to kill where it was guaranteed 4, and it was very easy to get the 3 shots. So huge meta shift, and we're going to see a little bit of how that works out. Maybe the ISO will sneak in there, maybe the AN, if it gets a little bit of buff for its damage range. We'll have to wait and see. If you did enjoy the video, let me know by hitting the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, just make sure you subscribe with notifications on. See you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.